industry on a whole, and even with NRAI and FHRI altogether, we have welcomed it. This, of course, admitting that it is progressive, and the responsibility is definitely on the industry to ensure that good and safe food is handed out to the consumer.
Absolutely.
But now there are a lot of caveats to this issue, and so therefore we have welcomed it, and we have said that we'll wholeheartedly do it. But all that we don't want you to do is run with a baton in your hand behind each and every, which also from the central FSSAI and also the local. Since last year, they are not actually prosecuting anybody. So they are, which is a very, very proactive step, which you'll never find in a governmental agency, that they've conducted seminars across the country. They've called the stakeholders. They've told them, see, this is what you need to do. Even though the law is today in place, and even though there are like 100 social activists saying that, look, this is the law, why aren't you implementing it? Why aren't you going and prosecuting these people? There are these RTI activists. There are so many of them. So despite of that, they've been positive. And this is really a good thing, because there is some maturity and some kind of modern thinking in the central leadership insofar as this authority is concerned. But what about the grey areas? All these caveats which come in, which will be in terms of the standards which are prescribed for each and every food particle, which is very, very dangerous, and which is actually is not supported by any scientific data. We don't really know how this came about without even the industry being consulted, which is the primary thing. Our objective is that when you're making something for us, you need to involve us. You need to understand our process. So if you say a particular standard has to be maintained in a product, it cannot be done uniformly across the country. A particular product in Maharashtra is not going to be the same in Gujarat, because the social demographics, the socio-economic scenario, everything has to be considered. So we felt that a sweeping law for across all segments of food business operators was a real difficult task. And then the standards prescribed for each and every particles were such that they actually not achievable in India. So definitely all those raw materials when you use and your product is going to go for sample testing, it's bound to fail. Because your raw materials in five different centers in the country are testing for different pesticide levels and residue levels. So this is the main problem with it, because when the raw material itself, when the government itself doesn't have a clear data on what the specified standard should be, why is this authority imposing a standard? And whether in the first place your farmer has been told whether this is what he has to maintain? No, your farmer has never been told. Your farmer continues to use whatever fertilizer without any control and restriction. So definitely all that is going to come onto the raw material and finally into the food. So how are you going to control this? So this is something we have given a very comprehensive document. We have taken some food scientists on the board, and we have given them, with empirical data, with website links that look, these are the issues. So what you need to do is pick up samples from all of your 5 godowns in the country, have a testing, and then have some average standard you prescribe, but you don't prescribe a standard which is not achievable in Indian condition. So this is one thing which is very worrying for us, that your samples are bound to fail. Second is the food labs which they have made mandatory in every establishment, which is again an impossible task. A standalone restaurant or let's say a sandwicher cannot have a food lab in their own place, and you need to do a sampling every month or maybe several times in a month.
On that, I think what they agreed, you have to get sampling done. It was actually twice a year. We pushed for once a year. I don't think they agreed, but you're allowed to send it out. You don't have to have your own. You have to have quality. You have to have one person in your organization who's
I agree. So
you can do it once or something.
The law mandates that you need to have it in your premises. Now they are agreeing that this is not practically possible in the Indian diaspora, so they are saying, okay, you go ahead and do it outside. But the problem is, where do you do it? It is in NABL accredited labs. Now those labs are only MNC labs. Now there you're charging sample charged are at 2,000 rupees. So which means which we have told very emphatically that you are promoting MNC labs and you're promoting everything that these MNCs are proposing, and we have a feeling that this entire drafting has been done by some MNC.
No, in fact it was rumored that the entire act has been copy pasted from couple of different countries, and what you're saying is it seems to be unfortunately true. I don't know whether it's
happened is what we are told unconfirmedly, that maybe some portion of the FICCI retail sector was allowed to, give their input at the last minute, because see, it had got the assent from the parliament and then it had to bring in by 2006. So they brought it. So there is definitely going to be a problem, because naturally, so some of the courts in the country have already stayed the provision. There is a stay on a lot of the provision which are applicable to us. So coming to these labs issues, so that is what we are representing, that let the industry have its own labs, and we are in fact in the process, and a pilot one is already working under FHRA aegis in Tamil Nadu, and in Bombay we are establishing one lab where we'll say that since this act is self-regulating, why do you want me to go to a MNC lab or you say that a particular 4 agency will certify your establishment. And we say that this is not fair. So we will self-regulate, like classification is done within the community, the tribal community, the hotel industry, the IHMs get together and classify a hotel. So let us do it. We will create our own labs. We will scientifically put everything that is required to be done, and we will also obtain NABL accreditation. But you don't tell us that you have to go to these particular labs only, which are incidentally only MNC labs. So that is one thing which we set up, and we are asking from the authority that you approve it, allow us to do it. Second is these individual auditors which have some qualification which is minimum of BSc, who have to be in every establishment, who has to audit reports just like they do in pharma medical stores. So again we said, how are you going to do this? Do you have so much of workforce? And it's going to be an additional cost burden on every operator. So we have said that why don't you allow us to train our own people to do this? We have our own IHM institutes. Our own chefs will be trained for it, and then by the trainer program, we'll see that it percolates down to each and every. So that particular person who will be certified, let's say by our IHM, will do this auditing which is required under the law. It's like you're submitting so many papers, so some certified guy has to sign on it. Okay, I've seen it, and these are okay. So that's another thing which we have asked, which is also a problem area, because this is going to raise your cost up. Apart from the fact that now standards are pretty stringent, so adherence of standards, which means you're going to add to your cost. You'll need greater levels of training, greater levels of hygiene, and you'll have more staff to monitor whether this is happening or not in the right spirit. So
Pradeep, you're representing the industry through which?
Through the FHR and
through the FHRA.
HRA.
Okay. Samir, do you all work together on this?
Yes, I agree that there's some stuff, but like I said, I think we found FSSAI people, I guess we're based in Delhi, so we perhaps engage with them a fair amount, very receptive.
Okay.
So now, of course, the second or third CEO, the CEO, they changed guys, that we found them very receptive. We found them accepting of the fact that they've got criteria which, they need to, and the guy at the first meeting himself said, I'm not, the law can't change.
Okay.
Realistic, law don't change. It's passed by Parliament, it's enacted, it's now in. However, if you've got practical issues, we will internally make sure that, if you agree and we think it's correct, then you come back with stuff. And they have. It took 8 months, 6 months, but 7 points, like I said, around 20 accepted and notified on their website. So clarifications issued out for restaurants.
Now they have set a 19-month deadline officially on the scientific, because there is a standards review committee.
So for something
so what can restaurators do to prepare for this?
But I think,
should we do something preemptively?
The fact that you have to have higher standards for hygiene, higher standards of training, I think is going to help. Initially, it's a bit of a cost, and it does impact your bottom line. But I think it will help your business. It will help grow your business eventually, because you'll have better training. We'll have better quality, better hygiene standards, and therefore better products, and testing. As long as the flexibility comes in, and there are 20 laboratories or there are 50 laboratories, which is what it should be. It should be so many laboratories. The idea is to get it tested, because you make sure it's a good practice to get products tested twice a year, once a year, whatever.
So regardless of whether the law is if and when it's implemented, still have the orientation. It's already implemented. No, but I mean what I meant is that it's not.
For some things that they're
not exercising. They're not sort of exercising
their. Saying, hey, don't worry. Like for a year, come on, what have they done? For
okay. Right.
Like it's very rare in 1 year in a government they've done in a department the laws there. They actually proactively reached out to the community.
Yeah.
Said, hey, let's organize seminars, let's talk to your people,
Okay.
what are your issues.
Okay.
So besides educating in a seminar,
They're coming proactively out and talking about
which is, I think,
Okay.
I W up on that. They're very receptive and they're very proactive. At the same time, as you said, the business will see this change in the mindsets of the operators, and it is going to slip into the system. Like today, we accept all the issues that we face with BMC. Maybe the next year when we sit on the same table, we are going to say, no, it makes sense.
Okay.
Over the period of time, we'll get immune to it.
But therefore, it is so much required that we rationalize it today. Otherwise, we will face another double issue after 5 years.
Oh, well.
We'll be complaining on like excise and
It
other
will be like any
departments.
other laws in India. Which you,
Sure.
for license,
see,
you
they-
don't need to really learn
They have
learn
to be
drive.
practical, they have to be achievable, and they have to be practical in the Indian scenario or in
Well,
every
also,
state.
most of the original laws are made by Britishers, so that's why you have to live with it. But this law is actually being made, within our control. So then might as well, at the first time when you get it right, rather
True.
than saying that.
but you know, to talk about
That first time nobody actually opposed or
No, but
nobody
to
knew what
mention
they
another
were
topic,
talking
I
about.
think, while it's still slow, and we are unfortunately as industry very licensed. One of the biggest issues that we've been going to the government, and we have. So in 2008, we got, after kind of, I'd say, advocacy for 2 years or 3 years, we got the MCD, the NDMC, to agree to 3-year licenses.
Okay.
Major issue.
Okay.
So instead of coming once a year to your restaurant, they only come once in 3 years.
Okay.
Okay? Health license once in 3 years. Police license once in 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, now I think Bombay also has something which is once.
But don't you see that as good?
That's great.
That they stay away
I
from.
think that if you work hard with the government,
Okay.
which we did
Yes.
for 2 years, and at the top level of the government, I've always seen this because I've
Thanks.
engaged with them for a few years. They listen. They're not interested. I mean, they listen. I mean, if you say we'll do self-regulation, we'll do this, they made it 3 years, once in 3 years. At the end of the day, Delhi used to have a closure time for restaurants at 11 p.m. It went from 11 to midnight. Now it's 1 a.m. It should be 24 hours.
Sure.
To me, it's discriminatory that hotels are out 24 hours and restaurants are not. Why?
Sure.
But the fact is that it's gone from 11 to 1.
Correct.
But there's still an issue because Bangalore is still stuck at 11 or 11:30, which is the pub culture.
Right.
And Bombay has 1, 2. So, but I'm saying, I think if you reach out and if you do, I think you can, and we've made change at the association level. We've seen that when our people have gone out there, when people have got together. So you have to go together. If you go as an independent restaurateur to the government, they ain't going to listen to you.
Sure.
If you go as a community, as a group, under an association, and you rationalize and you give something which is logical, I have often seen that, the only thing which we've never managed to succeed, and I don't, because the problem is that so many fiefdoms, is the multiplicity of licensing and single window.
Yeah.
But it's 10 to 12, and that we realize is just a wishful thinking over it.
True.
There are 12 departments who give up to one lane, never happens.
True.
That, unfortunately, is something which is the biggest issue.
But in your understanding, why is it that it takes so much money, generally for licenses, not for the food safety license, generally for licenses, why does it take so much time, so much money to acquire, to renew, even if you have one, and even if you fulfill all the criteria, like some of the participants have said, I mean, you fulfill all the criteria and they're still after you for that. I mean,
that was into a broader question
No, I
of
think
government servants in this country being underpaid, maybe. Of a culture in this country which is very difficult to, from decades to
No, I think
now.
this is a question like saying, why do staff leave?
True.
I mean,
There's no
there's
reason.
point going
True.
down that road. I mean, it's going to happen until it happens. And
okay, then the next logical thing is, then what is the next best? Under these circumstances, if you are living in this environment, this is the environment that we live in. We work in, we have to deal with this environment. How do we overcome this? Besides, of course, we have to
I think a very good
grease
point
palms.
is to understand the law.
Correct.
You have to understand whether the fine is 500
Yeah.
and you can rectify
Very
it in
true.
your time,
Very true.
or whether it's a fine which can actually put the director of the company
Like the
in prison.
FSSI.
True.
Right? So you have to understand what the implications are.
What are the implications?
More particular.
There are strong
Yeah,
implications.
if
There are
today,
strong
yeah.
implications.
1 year to
Today,
7
if
years
you're-
and 1 lakh to 10 lakh is what they talk to.
They've increased
Okay.
the fees significantly. The fines have increased significantly. The jail, so that is very trustworthy.
Although the entry gate is very less, it's like 10,000 rupees for 5 years, but the penalty is like real high.
So the only solution is that when you set up your place, see that you adhere to the law. That's the best solution. You can't go back and rectify anything because you can only go back and keep paying forever, but
it's
you can't
also
rectify.
relative to your supplies that come in. Since I work closely with food industry also, we do packaged food. Now I'll just give you an example. You have a packaged blended spice in India. and a packaged blended spice from Pakistan, that is allowed to have yeast extracts, which is MSG oriented, MSG kind of products. They allow that to have yeast extracts, and the